basically, Elo ve'Elo, they're both valid opinions, but some are just a little better than others, but everything works. How is that going to fit into our equation, okay? So I'm going to start with 3 specific questions. We'll dive into the topic of Elo ve'Elo. What does it mean all the answers are right? What does it mean, there's 70 answers, there's machlokes about everything. And then we'll go into specifically, how does a rabbi come to a decision on a halachic matter? It is based on, their whim. So I'll share my screen, we'll get started, and we'll think about a few questions. First thing is Elo ve'Elo. I mentioned a story, I think first time that we did the shirim is about Rabbi Bar Nachmani and Bava Metzia Peivav, where it has that one time in Shamayim, just reviewing the basic point just to bring out the question, in Heavens they were arguing about Safek Sarat, a question about Halakha about Sarat, and they didn't know what the answer was. Hashem said it was Tahor, the angel said Tameh, and they said, who's going to be the decider? Who's going to figure this one out? Hashem, the angels? They said, we have to ask a person. They called up, phone a friend, they called up Rabbi Bar Nachmani. They said, we can't talk to you. He's in this world, the Olam Hazeh. We can't talk to him. So who's going to go to the Shliach? Who's going to be the messenger to carry the message from Rabbah in this world to the heavenly court? They say, call the Malach HaMavet over. The Malach HaMavet escorted Rabbi Bar Nachmani on his final journey. He killed him. He distracted him from his learning, so he killed him. And then he brought him to Olam Haba, and they asked him, so what do you say? He said, it's Tahor. And he says, it's Ashrecha, how fortunate is Rabbah that the last words on his lips were Tahor. The question is, why do they need him to be, why do they need to ask Rabbah? And also, why do they need to kill him? And also, even further, is the Rambam follows the opinion that says Tameh. And Rabbi Yosef Karo asks, how could you possibly follow the opinion that says Tameh when Hashem said Tahor? And you know what, even if you're not sure, because the angels argued with Hashem, but then they asked the one to decide to make the compromise, who they asked Rabbah, and Rabbah said Tameh. The Rabbah said Tahor. So had the Rambam paskin against that decision. Okay, so we brought that question up. Ultimately, the answer is going to lie in what we're going to talk about, Elo ve'Elo, but it's a lot more than that. That the keys to halacha are given over to the rabbis in this world. Lo b'shamayim. We're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. We're talking about Elo ve'Elo. The Gemara tells us this concept. It says, once there were 3 years of machloka, and not just one, but hundreds of machloka between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. The students of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel proliferated lots of Torah, but lots of machloka, and a lot of disputes. And you know what? They didn't know what to do. It almost appeared like there were 2 Torahs in the world, the Beit Shammai Torah, the Beit Hillel Torah. What are they going to do? Halal omer halacha kamoseinu, halal omer halacha kamoseinu. Everybody said, follow us. They made a big poster, advertising the Beit Hillel, the right way to go. And then Beit Shammai, the smart way to do things, whatever. Everybody was voting for their opinion. Until the heavenly voice came out, Bakol Amra. They're both divine. Halacha, everybody's equal, some are more equal than others. But really, what does that mean? That they're both right, but we're going to follow Beit Hillel. Then where it says, that's my first question for the night is, what does that mean that there's objective divine reality and there's truth to what Beit Shammai said, but yet we don't follow them? If anybody's ever heard, it's quoted in the Vilna Gaon, that the Gra said, in the future, in the days of Mashiach, we're going to follow Beit Shammai. What's going on all of a sudden? Do we reject Beit Shammai? We never heard of him? Or is he saying a good idea? Why is it that we can follow halacha even if the other opinion's valid also? How does that work? And the Gemara says, you know who wins? Beit Hillel. Why? Why do they win? Says the Gemara, we don't understand. If they're both divine. Why do we follow them? They're very pleasant people. So you know what we should have said? They get the Midos Award. At the end of graduation, we'll give Beit Shammai the smart expert honors roll of honors. They'll get the valedictorian. Beit Hillel will get the nice award. In camp, there's always somebody they have to give the nice kid award to. But really, so why is the halacha about Beit Hillel? Because they're nice. So a lot of questions we brought up already. Let me just summarize. The main question I want to focus on is how can we follow halacha of one opinion if they're both right. What does that even mean? Any questions on what I said so far before I go on to my second question? Any extra questions? Any answers? Lidan, any solutions so far? Okay.
Still thinking about it.
Okay, great.
If I have something, I'll let you know for sure.
Awesome. So here's the second question. It's one thing maybe if we're talking about law, halakha, to talk about they're both right. How does that make sense? We'll talk about, but maybe like you could discuss, two lawyers arguing about a topic, they both can be bringing up valid points. There's a valid idea here, I can sort of get that. But what's more strange is as follows. Imagine that there was an argument between, let's say, Yehoshua and Kalev. What was the shirt that Moshe Rabbeinu was wearing when he came down from Har Sinai? Was it black or was it white? Yehoshua says, I know it was white. And Kalev says, no, it was definitely black. You have a picture for us? Okay, that I can't really see it on the screen so clear. So on the photographer is poseg. Okay, neither. Fine. Question is, would we say about that they're both right? What do we think? If there's argument about a reality, do we say that they're both right? They're both divine?
Good question.
Anybody think that doesn't make sense? Or think it makes sense?
I don't know. Maybe it makes sense. I don't know. Maybe one's talking about different, I don't know, different perspectives. Shirim, Panim da Torah, I don't know.
Okay, so fine. So let's see over here. I have one source for you. That's not exactly that case, but it's slightly different. It tells us this story. I'm not getting into all the details, but it talks about the Pilegesh Begiva and shows up a very sad story that a guy had a Pilegesh, a concubine, and one time they got in a fight, and one time the Pilegesh was out on the street, and horrible things happened to her. And because of the atrocity, the people in Binyamin took revenge upon that town, on those people, and led to full-out civil war in Klal Yisrael. Many people died over this horrible act because of one fight in a couple. What was the fight? Because the Navi doesn't tell you what started the story of Pilegesh Begiva. It's a terrible story. It talks about atrocities and immorality and things that are wrong. But what started it? What was the catalyst, the straw that broke the camel's back that started this horrible story that led to civil war? The Gemara says, well, it doesn't say. So we have two ideas. Rabbi Ebyatar Omar, Zvuv Matala. Rabbi Ebyatar says he found that there was a fly, whatever, either in his food or when they were together, whatever it is, bottom line, he found something displeasing. He found a fly that, basically it was too hot, not a good air conditioning. And then you have Rabbi Yonatan says, Nima Matala. He found that she had a hair. She didn't take a haircut recently. All right. She didn't shave. All right. So machlekes. Couples get into fights over lots of random things. So you have somebody said it was a fly that was in the house that's driving him crazy. Maybe he took a tennis racket, tried to swat the fly, and bam, she hit him in the head, and that led to the civil war. All right, maybe. But question is, what's the right answer? Says the Gemara, Ashla Rabbi Ebyatar Eliyahu. These rabbis are arguing, and Rabbi Ebyatar says he met up with Eliyahu in the street, and he saw Eliyahu and he said, Michael, please tell me, what's God doing at this moment? Hashem Almighty, what's he up to? I'm really, I think Pilegesh Begiva. You know what he's doing? He's learning the story of Pilegesh Begiva. So Rabbi Ebyatar says, come on, give me the good news. Tell me what's going on. What is the Kadosh Baruch Hu saying is happening? Michael Amar, Amrullah Ebyatar b'ni Omer Kach. My son Ebyatar says this. Yonatan b'ni Omer Kach. My son Yonatan says this. Rabbi Ebyatar heard this and said, oh my, what is going on? How does that make any sense? Chas v'shalom. How can you say such a thing, Eliyahu? Mika Sfeika Kam Yishrak. Hashem's not sure. Does that make sense? I'm like, they're both right. Come on, I don't understand. Did he find a fly in the house, or he found that she had hair? Which one? How can they both be right? Hashem recorded both in Shamayim. But like, if you took a video camera, Steven Spielberg, whatever, you find a good video of Shoktim, an exciting drama, terrible stories. Okay, rated R. What would they take the picture of? The fly or the hair? Which one's right? How could it be? And Hashem is saying that. So question number one is, what does that mean? They're both right, but we follow the halacha like the hill because he's nice. And second is, how does it make sense when we're talking about a question of reality? What happened? Was the shirt black or was the shirt white? You can also have a machloket. Okay, now here goes the third question. I'll get back. Okay, that's one thing. Those are the two main questions. I have a third one. The third one we'll get to later. I don't need to get to it right now. The third question is, if halakha is subjective, basically, people like to say this, that if there's a halachic will, then there must be a halachic way. Because just about any, and let me ask that question. Who thinks that's right? That statement's correct or not? If there's a halachic will, there should be a halachic way. If you almost look into, let's say, Chamovadia's Chuvot, he finds a kula for many, many things. Who thinks that's true and who thinks that's not right?
I would disagree.
Why do you disagree? What do you think?
Because depending on based on what you said before, that rabbis have some sort of like a hashgacha. I think that's what you said, and they're connected to the Torah in a certain way. Then they have a certain leniency, but that's rooted within halakha. But then but if you just want to say, based on just on the person's will, you could just say, I just want to do something today, and that goes completely against halakha. Obviously, that's not right.
Absolutely done. Okay, on the mark. So we're going to talk about it. For those, this is not, it becomes a very controversial question, which we brought up last time, about partnership minions. If anybody heard about those, there was a long discussion about it. And one of the best articles written on the topic was a very lengthy essay. Now I'm just forgetting the names. By two brothers that were big. They knew a lot of Torah, and they wrote a very, very long article, 180 pages in tradition, and 120 of the pages were footnotes. And they went back and forth. They come out to saying that they shouldn't do partnership minions with giving women aliyot. Now, the question is, it's hard sort of to dispute. Anybody else who wrote about the topic did not do as good a job in terms of sources. Chamovadia's best true vote are 500 sources. I think that they quoted 1,000, more than 1,000 sources. So who are you going to follow? Do you follow a posek who says, look, I have 1,000 sources? Or you say, look, he's a well-established rabbi? That's what I'm getting into a little bit. Okay, so now here's my piece on trying to answer these first two questions about Eila ve'Eila. And then we'll go back to the controversial stuff, partnership and other controversial stuff about Agunas, the International Beis Din. And let me ask like this, about the International Beis Din. If you feel bad, a woman is an Aguna, she can't get remarried because the husband's a jerk. He doesn't want to give her a get for 10 years already. He's just causing her trouble. Do you try to sit there and say, can we find any lenient opinion to the Machid Aguna? And what if it's just a minority opinion no one's heard of? Do we do that? This came up a few years ago, a very big controversy in Schechter, International Beis Din, a very serious case. What do you think?
Yeah, we cannot follow that. Depends really if it's your rabbi. If it's your rabbi, yes. If it's not your rabbi, no.
Okay, but maybe we should feel bad that she's been Aguna for 10 years. We should feel bad.
Yeah, but also it says in the Torah not to. So, how are we gonna go? It doesn't matter the feelings at the end of the day. It's what does the Torah say?
Wow. Okay, so fine. Any other thoughts before we dive into the approaches? Here we go. You could just unmute yourself and join in. So I have a big machloket here between, on the one hand, Rav Schechter, on the other hand, Rabbi Meir Mazuz. To the left is Rabbi Meir Mazuz, Tunisian, a big Talmud Chacham, and He has the Ish Matzliach. His father is Rabbi Matzliach Mazuz, killed by a terrorist in Israel, and he lives in Bnei Brak and he has a yeshiva. And the one thing, anybody know what Rabbi Schechter and Rabbi Mazuz have in common? Well, Rabbi Mazuz is basically Haredi and he's Sephardi. Rabbi Schechter is more in the modern Orthodox camp and Ashkenazi. Anybody know what they have in common? What they wear?
They're both Jewish.
They both wear tchelas. All right. Anyway, so question is like this: there's an awesome dispute between Rabbeinu Tam and Vilna Gaon about when is nighttime. Does nighttime start? Let's just say 13 and a half minutes, but for our purposes, 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes after sunset, or is it 72 minutes, or a little bit later? Awesome machloket. Rabbeinu Tam versus the Gra. And guess what? It's not one-on-one. Rabbeinu Tam was a Tosot, a grandson of Rashi. The Vilna Gaon was 1700s. We talked about in the history. It's not that. It's over 80 Rishonim. All the Baalei Tosot, and the Ramban, and Rashba, and Ritva, and Mukhi Yosef, and Meiri, and Hashlama, and maybe Rashi, and you can keep listing them, Meiri, and so on and so forth. Over 80 Rishonim. Ravadia in his Truv quotes 25. But after the academics are done with it, they found 80 Rishonim that sided with Rabbeinu Tam. And Shulchan Aruch followed Rabbeinu Tam. And the Gra in the 1700s came along and said, sorry, I don't like it, doesn't make sense to me. Undid the Gra, and he went and made a new approach that night falls much sooner. Anybody know how the Halakha follows? What we do in the Halakha?
You follow the Gra.
The main Halakha, most mainstream places is they keep Shabbat, whatever, 25, 30, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, but not 72. That's the mainstream Halakha in most places. 80 Rishonim versus the Vilna Gaon. In the days of the Vilna Gaon, there was nobody else who said like him. And he was taking everybody on, but he said, look, I think I'm right. It came out afterwards. He didn't prove this. Afterwards, they showed from Tshuva Gaonim, from the Gaonim before the Rishonim, from the 500 to 1,000 from that time period, they found several Gaonim that had this opinion. And later, people speculate maybe it's also the Rambam, and maybe it's also a few other Rishonim. But still, it still is almost an 80 to 1 argument over here. You have the scale, 80 to 1, there's no question, 80 wins. In terms of Achronim, there are 186, I think, Achronim that side with Poskin that side with Rabbeinu Tam. 186 versus 1. What do we get? The Halakha still basically follows the Vilna Gaon today because that's the Minhag. It just shows you the power of Minhag. One of the second thing that we talked about is the power of Minhag of being Koveh the Halakha. Even Chomavadi, in his earlier Chuvot said we should be very careful about Rabbeinu Tam, and his later Chuvot says that Halakha is like the Vilna Gaon. Okay, we should try to be strict, but that's the Halakha is like the Vilna Gaon. Question is, now that we follow the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, could you use as a factor Rabbeinu Tam, like going into Shabbat? If somebody's running late, could you do something like Dirabanan if you're running late? Can you get in a cab, right after Shabbos starts, after sunset for the next 60 minutes because Rabbeinu Tam says anyway it's day for another hour? Could we use Rabbeinu Tam or not?
Shatat Chak.
Okay, why? But I thought we don't follow Vilna Gaon. I thought we don't follow the Rabbeinu Tam. That's what you said.
Does that depend on the situation?
Okay, I'm sure it definitely depends on the situation. Yeah. Okay, so here's the machloket. Rav Schechter says, look, if it's a machloket about the reality and one opinion's wrong, they're wrong. Forget it. Rabbeinu Tam is wrong. Don't talk about it. It's not Torah anymore. It's a waste of time. Waste of time. It's not the right opinion. It's not even Torah to discuss, and therefore it's very charis. Opinion 80 Rishonim is incorrect, and therefore it's about a reality, whether it's night or day. And we see the stars come out. Obviously, it's night. Rashadar says you cannot even include it into a safek. It's not. You can't be lenient on deraita, on derabanan. You can't use fake seiko. You can't use a double doubt, two seiko together. It doesn't count for a factor for anything. Ravadia classically a dozen times does do that. He says, come on, even though, we follow the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, but Rabbeinu Tam, Shulchan Aruch, let's include him at least for a Safek, Sveka, something, let's include him. Rabbi Mazuz says, nope, we don't follow the Gra. We don't follow Rabbeinu Tam, you can't even include him for a factor. He's Sardi and he usually follows what the ideas say. Very strict opinions over here. There's another thing Rosh Hashanah, I guess, has in common with Rabbi Mazuz, but for different reasons. Rosh Hashanah's point is it comes from Rashi. The Gemara says that there are two opinions. This doesn't happen one page. It happens almost all the time. That somebody says something, and Tana says something, and there's two opinions. What did he say? Did Rabbi Meir say X, or Rabbi Meir say Y? Rashi says about that, they can't both be right. You don't say Elu Elu. You say when they're both arguing about what makes sense, or what does the Torah mean, or what happened in a certain story, Elu Elu is all valid. But it can't be, Rabbi Meir talked out of both sides of his mouth, Mutar Asur. He said either Mutar Asur, one is right, one's wrong. The guy who didn't hear it, wax in his ears, didn't hear, he's wrong. There's nothing to talk about, not Elu Elu. So I'm just trying to show limits to Elu Elu. So then what about the Gemara I brought before about the Pilegish Begiva? So I have three approaches like this. What does it mean that they're both right? But yeah, we can follow the Halakha. So the first approach is from the Chida. Rechaim David Azulai, 1700, Sardi, he says like this. You can get truth even out of wrong opinions. The wrong opinion is not the Halakha because it's wrong. But it's not so dead wrong that it's a waste of time. The Gemara has a parak in Yevamot that's called Parak Beit Shammai. We learn many, many things from the wrong opinion, even though it's not correct, but it's something that we can learn from. If you have a diver and they go diving in the sea and they're looking for a pearl and instead they find a shell, it's not a waste of time what they did. It could be they found the shell and underneath the shell, next time they're going to dive, they're going to go and find a gem. So it says a story, and he says, look, this is what happened. Shimon Amsuni was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva, and he was Dorish, he was looking at every single et, the word et in Torah, and he said, oh, it's a reboid, add something. And he was Dorish this one and this one, and this is magnum opus for 5,000 ets in the whole Torah. He has an explanation. He gets to one of them, and he says, oh, it doesn't make sense. He threw the book and gave his eye, threw it out. And the student said, Rabbi, what are you doing? It's such a, you worked so hard on this, how could you throw it out? He said, look, Hashem gave me a reward for the fact that I worked hard on trying to come up with this theory, and Hashem's going to give me a reward for throwing it out. What do you mean, says the Chida? He's going to get a reward for trying? E for effort. Should get an F. He failed. Says the Chida, no. From trying, you understand better and more accurately and much more clearly what the truth is. That's the first approach. And second approach is like this. Even the opinions that are wrong, they're right in some alternate universe. In some one way or the other, even if they didn't happen the way we know it, they did happen in some way, he says in a ganuz way, in a hidden way. It's true also. And just like the luchot that were broken, we're putting genizah and we're still holy, the Mishkan, where the Mishkan looked this way or looked that way, both opinions could be right in some way. One of the opinions is the way it appeared, and one opinion is also correct, it's just not the way it appears to us. A very counterintuitive sort of approach, but I'll get to one thing that I think will clarify that later, okay? We'll come back to it. Any questions on these first two approaches before I get to my favorite approach, even though those are probably the more classic approaches. The second approach is probably the most classic, but that they're both right, just looking at different perspectives. Any questions?
So basically, let's say the machloket of the Rambam, I don't know which one also discusses about the shape of the menorah. The Rambam says it's
Rashi, yeah, and Rambam. Was it an angle or the curve? So that what you would say like this is a very excellent question. I think you would say, according to the Chida, one opinion is right, one opinion is wrong, but we learn from the wrong opinion is Torah also. Because we want to learn more accurately, better, why did he make the mistake? I'll learn accurately how to learn correctly. But fine, not that opinion. The second approach I have from Rav Hutner was that the opinion that is like the right opinion is just the opinion that's in practice the way we see it. But in truth, both of them are right. One of them just goes to Geniza. If someone made a menorah like this, it wouldn't be the way that Hashem wanted. It would be put in Geniza. But fine. No, sorry, I didn't say right. It's not that Hashem doesn't want it that way. It would be if you had a menorah like that, it would be true in a way. It wouldn't be true in our eyes. So we put in Geniza, but now that doesn't have Kedusha. So in terms of the Pelagish Giva, just to say, in terms of that one's easy, the Gemara even later explains, it both could have happened. Could be there was a fly in the house, and she was swatting the fly, and then her hair fell out, and whatever he was bothered. Both of them could have happened at the same time. It's not people get a couple scan fights over many things. It doesn't take only one thing to fight. But in terms of the menorah, the answer I think would be the Rav Hutner's idea is a very complicated thing, but they're both right in some way, some aspect of it. Okay, let me get to Maharal. I'll get back to his opinion, and we'll answer your question a little bit better, maybe. According to the Rav Hutner, it's very hard to explain. I'll agree. The third approach is my favorite. Angelaja, you want to say something? You want to add? Okay, so here's the third approach. It goes like this. Maybe there's no such thing as, I wouldn't say no such thing, but it doesn't matter what objectively Hashem had in mind when he gave us the Torah. Hashem gave us the Torah to interpret, and he gave us the Torah in each and every generation of the rabbis to understand what's the right thing. Whatever they're going to decide is actually correct. And in terms of Elu, they're both right because that's how Hashem gave us the Torah, with both options available to all the time to come. And there's a Ritva in the Eruvin that makes it very clear and beautiful. He says, when Moshe got the Torah and he asked him some questions, what's the halakha of using a microwave on Shabbat? So Hashem said, I'll give you 49 explanations why it's mutar, 49 reasons why it's asur. And he says, Moshe, so what's the answer? And Hashem said, that's up to you. That's a beautiful medrash that the Ritva brings from Balei Tosas that's basically telling us that both are right because that's both what Hashem had in mind. What do we follow? The halakha has nothing to do with objective truth. Halakha has to do with the way we decide things. And now, let me explain, although this is about to become very controversial. If it goes by what we decide, so why don't we just say, well, Matra Daguna, she's been not married for 10 years, and we feel terrible for her. Why isn't it true, and Lidan's right, the halachic will does not make a halachic way, but why not? This is the question that the Ran asks. He says, in science, would you ever hear that a doctor says, I don't know what the actual answer, I don't know the cure to corona, I don't know the cure to cancer, I don't know the cure to this, but I feel terrible, and I really want this to work. I have a shot in Halakha. Can I make up? There's some minority opinion that somebody that once, which doctor, once somebody said, like, if I give them vitamin C, it'll solve the cancer. Let me try it. Let me do it. Is that going to work just because it's a shot? It's like he needs it to work. Says the Ran, of course not. It's ludicrous. Science doesn't work that way. It depends on your whim. It doesn't go by shot, rely on a minority opinion. Either the guy's going to get better, or it's going to the medicine's not going to work. So says the Ran, it doesn't make sense. How can you say we could make up a halakha against what Hashem said? The guy's going to die if he doesn't. Says the Ran, the spiritual reality of, let's say, by Beit HaMikdash, it's in Shamayim. Everything that's spiritually connected to the world. When a person eats kosher, it gives kedusha to their body. It adds kedusha to Hashem's name, as we talked about last time. Says the Ran, even though when a person does, let's say, something that's wrong in objective terms, they should really be poisoned spiritually. But the mere fact that they follow the rabbis is enough of a cure, enough of a reason to get reward that it supplants everything else. Hashem will take care of altering and making the Torah a spiritual reality based on what the rabbis say. And therefore, it's not like the doctor with the medicine. If Hashem is going to give us, it gives the rabbis the tools to say, Sadi goes there, Hashem Akayim. Hashem says, if you're going to say that this is going to be tahor, the guy on Shabbat that does it, and it's mutar, he's not going to get punished for that. Even though I think it's wrong. That's the Chidush HaRan, one of the Rishonim. Not Apikor Sud, he's not going down the road of halachic will. He's saying, halacha that's understood by human beings, in fact, actually generates a new spiritual reality. So they're both right. Halakha is like one of them. Why are they both right? Because the Ritva said, Hashem and Shamayim told us both options. He left this open for us. Now, I want to bring out a few examples. I think it's just so beautiful. I'll do it without the screen, but the Chavis Yair asks the same question. He says the same thing, that the world sort of changes spiritually whenever the rabbis make a decision. One story is like this, and I heard this from Rabbi Mansour. This on the Sama Rabbi. It says a great idea. Rabbi Akiva, and then the Gemara Yevamot, it says like this. Rabbi Akiva was one time drowning. One time was on a boat, and the boat had a shipwreck. There was a terrible storm, hurricane, and capsized the boat. And he fell into the ocean, and he was swimming. And thank God he didn't drown. There was a board of wood, a plank of wood that fell right next to him. And he grabbed the hold of the board of wood, Daf Shel Sfina, ultimately, and every wave that came my way, Neneti Rosho, he didn't drown because of each of the waves. He turned his head, the wave came, the wave went, and he totally was swept ashore, and he survived. Rabbi Gamliel found him and said to Rabbi Akiva, how did you survive the shipwreck? You were 1,000 miles off of the coast. We thought for sure you were dead. He said, look, I had a miracle, amazing thing. There was a plank of wood that saved me. I mean, Daf Shel Sfina, people have the drasha, that's the Daf Yomi. I'm not going down that track. But Rabbi Akiva said, it was the Daf, it was the plank of wood that saved me. He said, but what about the waves? Why didn't those drown you? He said, no, because I turned my head. Says Rabbi Gamliel, says, oh, now I understand how wise are the rabbis that they said a husband who goes at sea and drowns at sea, if there's an ocean where you can't look, you can look at the horizon, you can't see the end of it. It's not like a pond where you can see the other end. And if a husband drowns over there, the wife is chas v'shalom aguna. Unless you see that he drowned and died, you can't testify that his wife could get remarried. Why? Because it could be he floated ashore somewhere. If it's a pond, you know he drowned, so he drowned. But if it's an ocean, you don't know that. So Rabbi Gamliel said, how wise are the rabbis that they said that the wife is an aguna? Because look, it happened that Rabbi Akiva survived. And we couldn't let his wife remarry. Question is, the Ein Yaakov says, why was that like, that was the first thing that he's thinking of. He just said, let's make a party. Hotel Hashem Kitov, you're alive. He's saying how wise are the rabbis? And why wasn't, if that was like such a chidush, why wasn't that the first thing? Why does he interrogate him? How did you survive? And then he says that. So Rabbi Mansour said the following idea. He said, incredible. He said, if the rabbis would have ruled that a man that drowns at sea is actually, his wife is allowed to remarry. If the rabbis would have been posek that, they made the halakha that husband that drowns at sea is dead and his wife is allowed to remarry, Rabbi Akiva would never have an egg. He would have died. Rabbi Akiva would never have survived. Rabbi Gamliel said, how do you survive, Rabbi Akiva? He says, oh, a miracle, incredible things happened. There was a plague and the waves didn't drown me. He said, oh, how wise are the rabbis. What he meant is, I see the rabbis made a spiritual reality that made it possible for you to survive. The rabbi said, oh, is your wife allowed to remarry? He said, no, he might be alive. That's what gave the ability, says the Rabbi Mansour from the Sama Rebbe. That's what made it possible for Rabbi Akiva to survive. That was Rabbi Gamliel's statement. Rabbi Gamliel wasn't saying, oh, the rabbis are wise. He was saying, it was because of the miracle. And if it wouldn't be for those rabbis paskin, I would have rather not come back. They say about Chom Ovadia, unfortunately got many agunot questions after the Yom Kippur War. And many women came to him and cried with his wife in his house, and he was posek, trying to figure out if he could match that agunot with certain piece of information, evidence that the husband died. And it was over 2,000 cases, and he was posek on many of them that she could get remarried. And Rabbi Yitzchak said there was not one case in his lifetime that happened that he was posek, that the woman could remarry and the husband appeared. And it has happened in history, unfortunately, that Chatam Sofer has a story about him in the 1800s. When somebody went to war, they thought died, and he went into the Beit Din, and Chatam Sofer was posek, she can get remarried, we're sure he's dead. And guess what, unfortunately, the guy came in a few years later, he appeared. And now it's terrible. The children are mamzerim. And the Chatam Sofer said, I'm not going to be judging Aguna cases anymore because I made the wrong mistake. Chamav had Siyata Shema that his word was kept. There's more stories about that, but I'll save it for another. One story. Rabbi Yitzchak says that one time there was a case of an Amgunah after Yom Kippur War that Chamav would not want to be matir. He said information was not good enough. He said, I can't be matir. Hopefully the husband will come. And it was a few months and nothing came. And then the Egyptians made a deal with Israel that they'll send back some of the prisoners of war. And they sent a list of the Israelis that were taken captive, and the wife went and checked with Chamav. Look, he's not one of the prisoners. Can you allow me to remarry? Look, you see, he wasn't taken prisoner in Egypt. And he said, no, maybe check. I have one of the surgeons check. Maybe the names are wrong. It wasn't wrong. They checked. Nothing worked. A few months later, Israel made a deal with Syria to get back the prisoners of war from the Israelis, from the Syrians. And the same thing happened. They went to Chamav and said, can you matir the woman already? The husband's on the list of prisoners. And he said, no, I can't be matir. Not enough information. Go check it out. Maybe they got the names wrong. They went, one of the soldiers went to go check and greet all the prisoners of war that came from Syria. And they were checking off a list, all the people. And after, there was somebody limping that had one leg working. And they said, you're not on the list. Who are you? They said, oh, he was the person that this woman that asked to Chamav to matir her, because he did come back and he wasn't on the list. It was the whole story. But that shows that the Siyata Shmaya, the heavenly assistance Hashem gives a rabbi to make the right decision. Okay, now those are the approaches to Elu ve'elu. One is that the opinions are the chidah. The opinion that's wrong is really wrong, but we learn from mistakes. And the second opinion was that there's two sides of an equation, two sides that are right. And the third approach is that there's truth that is generated by both opinions, because of both what God said in the beginning. By Har Sinai, he said both opinions, but the Halakha follows, and the Hashem is Hakela Gomer, Hashem follows Sadiq Gozer, Hashem Mekayem, Hashem follows what the rabbis say. And that creates a new spiritual reality. In terms of the second approach, there's a lot of beautiful things. There's two ways of seeing everything. The Maharal says Hashem gave us the Torah, all of us at the same time, and everybody understood it differently on purpose, because you only can make a full, beautiful, white light if you have all the colored light together. So we can only have one Torah if you have all the Jews together, all the minhagim together to make up a full Torah. Without which you can't have a full Torah. I'm going through. This is just the snippet version, just to get to the end of it. In terms of the styles of the poskim, how does the rabbi make a decision? So the Ramban says everybody who knows Talmud knows the way things work is arguments. Nothing is clear. He says, I'm going to argue now. My whole book is a big argument on the Baal Mor. He said, but you know what? I admit full well that none of my proofs are foolproof. But guess what? I still believe them. Why? Because the power of an argument is what's most reasonable, what seems to be the truth. And that's the conviction that Halakha has, a person who's in search of the right thing, even though it's not going to always be clear. And that's what makes it very ambiguous and vague, but you still have to try. The Sephardi approach in one line is that we look at all the poskim, we look at precedents. So we're midget standing on the shoulders of giants, of Chamav and Ben Ish Chai and others. Ramosha is very much into when a person wants to figure things out, he has to have a path. And now I want to get to the controversy. He has to have a path and a svarah, an intellectual understanding of the Gemara very clearly. Now, I'll finish with this controversial topic. The partnership union was one of them. In a book, Rabbi Aaron Feldman brought up this topic. He's the Rosh Hashiva near Yisrael. He's the Rosh Hashiva near Yisrael, and he spoke at the Aguda, and he spoke at the Shem Zach. He wrote the River Cattle and the Bird, a well-known speaker, Rosh Hashiva. He said, and he wrote a book a few years ago about a lot of controversial topics. One of them was about feminist halakha that relate to feminist things. And he starts ripping on certain things, and he takes a big, difficult approach, because he says, hey, look, the way we judge halakha has to have certain rules. There's precedent. We have to go with the Rishonim. You can't violate the Rishonim. And the Rishonim says, well, then we can't change that. And he said other things why the feminist halakha was not the approach he liked. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein wrote a book review of his Sefer. And then Rav Aaron Feldman wrote back to him in a very friendly manner. They both have letters back and forth. They're printed in Jewish Action to the spring 2010. And what they said is, when do you say you can argue with the Rishon? Rabbi Feldman said we hardly ever do that, and Rabbi Aaron Muslim said it's not always true that we can never. Rav Moshe Feinstein sometimes will argue and decide between Rishon. The Geras we talked about before was 80-1, but it doesn't matter. Somewhat to some degree we follow the Vilna Gaon. That's one of Aaron Muslim's proofs. But it doesn't mean, says Rav Aaron, that in practice we're going to uproot the Rishonim. It means Hashem gave us the Torah to figure out. It's up to us to understand it. It's our prerogative and our challenge to have to figure it out. But with Yirah Shamayim, to figure out what it seems to us to be the absolute truth in Hashem's eyes, and then Hashem will accept that and make a new spiritual reality based on that. But in practice, we don't uproot Rishonim very much at all. But that was a lot of controversy came out of that. Any questions? I know I didn't get to everything at all, but hopefully I answered my questions. How does a rabbi posek? The answer is there's a breakdown of the question. That to try to use for the answer.
What time is the class over?
Then they come out with whatever they think is the right thing, and Hashem will decide that it's right as long as they have Yirah Shamayim and come out with the right answer. So that's my approach. Any additions, questions?
So basically, can I pass him my shayla with my phone?
Okay. So the answer to that question is. There's a difference between a live.
Mike, I'm signing off, but I just wanted to say it was very enjoyable.
Thank you, Aunt Shefra.
And you did a beautiful job this whole term.
Thank you so much.
I got a lot of new insights.
Thank you for joining us for so many all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The difference between the smartphone and the rabbi is that the smartphone can't have a search for truth. He can't know what's going to be the right answer. He can show you there's a machloket, but he can't tell you who's going to be your rabbi, the one to do it. So everybody should pick their own rabbi, should follow somebody and be consistent. Because that's the way of the Torah. And if the rabbi that they follow says X, they're not going to get punished or for if that opinion, so to speak, wrong. Hashem follows the way of that opinion that's a valid opinion. Elu ve'elu, they both have validity. So you can't follow a smartphone in the sense that if there's a machloket, you can't decide for yourself without fully understanding it properly. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah, of course. But let's say it's the rabbi that you always pass him. Like, let's say that the Sfardi always pass him like Yitzchak Yosef. So you find literally the
smartphone. If the smartphone is just relating information, so it's just a messenger. Then yes, if that's the posek you usually follow, then yes, you can pass him from your smartphone. Those are not so much a psak, a shiloh that's very weighty. Those are, a lot of times the Rishatas or Salvation would answer a question by saying, I'm just telling you what it says in the books. Look, if he's just telling you what it says in the books, it's the same thing as smartphone as a human being. He just, supercomputer could be a very good posek. The question is only when he has to decide something that's not clear. It's applied to life, and that's hard sometimes to do. Now you need a real person to size it up.
Ike, is it true to say that Halakha is law b'shamayim chi? It's decided on the ground by the people, the participants here.
Yes, very much. It's very much decided. And I was trying to discuss how does that make any sense, and there are different approaches. I got to three approaches, but yeah, we definitely assume that we go with the halakha that we're deciding now, that we decide on earth.
And also, you don't shop around and pick one opinion from this rabbi and one from that rabbi.
Yeah,
you have to always go the same way.
I have to go, but I'd love to discuss more things. Anybody else? Any other quick questions?
Thank you, Ike.
Thank you so much.
Great.